How do you fit a suit? What are the things that you want to be looking at? What is the correct way of doing that? That's what we're going to be talking about today for this week's Tricky Thursday. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Trisha. I'm your pattern nerd friend, owner of Creative Costume Academy. And on Thursday, I share a tip or trick with you that I have learned in my 20+ year long career making costumes for big theatrical productions. Not only have I made costumes for big theatrical productions, but I've also worked backstage on several productions. We are talking Broadway shows, Cirque du Soleil, dancers, operas, and everything in between. This is where I've picked up a lot of my knowledge, and I like to share little tips that can help you in your sewing and pattern making journey on Thursdays. We affectionately call it Tricky Thursday. If you like this kind of thing, if you are interested in all things pattern making, or fitting, or just learning about the world of costuming, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications so you never miss a video, and please share this with your friends if you think they will find it helpful. All of that really helps to support my channel. It's completely free, and it helps me continue to bring you tips that hopefully you find helpful and you can put into use in your sewing life. Today we're going to be talking about suit fitting. Now, I want to put a disclaimer. I am not a professional tailor. I don't focus on making suits, fitting suits. There's definitely a more niche skill. I do love pattern making. I have made several suits. I have altered lots of suits. One of the shows that I worked on for over 5 years, I think it was over 5 years, was Jersey Boys, which is a very male-heavy cast. It's all blazers and button-down shirts and slacks for most every character. So we have fit a lot of suits besides all of the other shows that I have worked. I do want to put this disclaimer. This is just in my experience, the things that I have learned and I have found most helpful. And this is a question that has come up a lot from viewers, followers, and students. How and what is the best way to fit a suit? So I'm going to be sharing my top tips. We can't go over every single alteration or every fitting thing that could possibly come up, but I can share with you what I'm paying attention to. The other thing I want to point out is that suit fitting and the way that the rules of what is proper with a suit has changed a lot through the decades, through history. So it really depends on what you are going for. So it's really up to interpretation. One of my favorite sayings is, you are the boss when you are making adjustments, making patterns, doing a fitting. You are the one who calls the shots. I am not a big fan of this is the correct way, which is why I put it in parentheses when I started this video, because in my opinion, it really depends on the circumstance. It depends on the era in which you are fitting the design for. It also, if it's for somebody's personal suit, it could be their personal taste and what they find to be, the way they like things to fit. Let's just go back to the fact that menswear in general is really kind of similar silhouettes, and just like the size of the collar will change, the fit of the suit, how it is worn. For several decades, it has been basically a button-down shirt, some form of pant or slack, and a blazer or a suit, of course. So there are little subtle differences, and I don't know all of those, but I'm just going to be sharing general things. Now, in more recent times, suits have gotten very skin tight, and that is the style. To have a suit that is fitting you very closely, tight, short hems, skinny legs, and that has been a more modern silhouette for the suit and for a suit jacket. Now, traditionally speaking, that would be a little bit too small. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, take what works for you and you find helpful, and leave the rest. I am not here to preach to you that this is the way to do it. I'm just sharing with you things that I pay attention to when I'm fitting a suit, and hopefully they will also help you. All right, now that's a bit better. He was a little shorter before. So now you can actually see the whole blazer. Now we can get into it. First thing that I know about suits, actually any fitting of a garment, you want to make sure that it is closed, that you can close it. If it is pulling or, this is coming apart at the hem, that means that it can't comfortably be worn closed. Even if you plan to wear it open all of the time, a correctly fitted garment should close properly as it's made to. Now, you can choose to be like, it's too small, so we are just always gonna wear it open so we don't know. But the way that it should be fit, when it's fit, even if you plan to always wear it open, is to close the closure in front. Now, here's something that changes. This is a 3-button suit jacket, and sometimes we just have 1 button, sometimes we have 2, sometimes we have 4. The one thing that I have picked up and learned along the way, it is traditional and kind of a standard of wearing a suit that you always leave the bottom button unbuttoned for blazers and for vests. So if you only have 1 button, then obviously that's not the case. But if you have multiple buttons, that you always leave that bottom one unbuttoned. Next thing that I always pay attention to is the biceps. So on a traditional suit, and this is where I'm talking about those modern, tighter fit suits, this is not always the case. But traditionally, we want to feel the biceps when I do this, where I can feel the biceps. By the way, this is Jason, the people. We haven't introduced you yet. So while we're talking about him, he should at least have a name. If you cup either sides, like I am feeling the biceps, but notice you're not seeing, they should fall in line with the shoulder pad of the suit. A lot of times you will see where the bicep is kind of bulging out beyond the shoulder pad, and that is not traditional the way it should fit. Your shoulder pads should slightly extend past your shoulders. So the whole point of a shoulder pad and the structure of a suit is so that you're giving that more square, more broad-shouldered look. Now, of course, that also gets more exaggerated in, say, the 80s, but typically for a clean, just kind of generic, well-fit suit, usually you don't want to have the biceps bulging past the shoulder pad, and so that is something to consider. Another thing with the shoulders, when we're talking about making adjustments and making alterations, a lot of times it's easier to make adjustments in the waist, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, as long as the shoulders fit. Now, altering the shoulders is possible, but it is always easier to make something smaller than to make it bigger, because in order to make it bigger, you either have to have seam allowance or you have to add another fabric. And unless this suit was made and you have the more fabric, even if you had the fabric, you would have to see a seam or somehow make it part of the design, which could be a little tricky and may not be the design that you're going for. So if you have a choice of size, then I would choose one that is your shoulder width, even if you have to take it in a bit in the waist. Now, if your waist is larger than your shoulders, this is a size 44 long on Jason, and he is about a 44 chest, so that is correct. And I do want to mention that that is the suit size, meaning that this actual suit probably measures around a 46, giving 2 inches of ease. That's a general rule, not true for every size, because sizing changes across companies to make everything more complicated. But if you're going to pick a size, go with the bigger measurement. It is always easier to measure down. If you do want to take in the shoulder, that is possible. Usually you would make that adjustment here at the top of the shoulder, and you would measure how far in you would cut that arm. It does get a little bit tricky. That's not my favorite alteration. So if you can avoid that, you will save yourself a lot of time and labor. But you can bring the shoulder in, and you would have to then maybe cut down the shoulder pad a little bit. And there's also a lining typically on most suits, so you're going to be bringing all of that in. Typically you wouldn't adjust the lower part of the sleeve unless you are also taking it in here as well. So we're going to talk about that waist in a minute. The next common adjustment that I saw a lot, especially when I was working on more Cirque du Soleil type of shows, working with acrobats. Now, acrobats are built differently than the average Joe that we see walking down the street. So this may not pertain to you, but if you have somebody who works out a lot, who has built out their lats. Now, acrobats, I kind of think of them as upside down triangles. They are very built up here in the yoke, neck, shoulder, bicep area, and they're really teeny in the waist. So in that case, I would go with something that fits them in the shoulders. A common adjustment that I would run into for many acrobats is you would see this wrinkle in the back. I'm trying to make that happen. Can we see that wrinkle where it would be like a crease just below the collar? The reason for that is their muscles were so built up in this area. If we were going with an off the rack suit, it would pull tightly and this neck would need to be shortened slightly. So how I would do that in the fitting is I would feel where the wrinkle is, pinch out that wrinkle, and do some safety pins. I would go both sides, but for sake of this video, I'm just pinning the one side. So generally, it's kind of like a dart. If you've been following me for any length of time, I talk a lot about darts, and when I'm fitting, I am seeing things as a dart. I would have the fat part of the dart in the center where the most amount of fabric needs to be taken away, the biggest part of the wrinkle, and then I would try to pin it out so that the point of the dart, now this would be like a fisheye dart, but the point of the dart would hit my shoulder seam so that I could make it go away. Now, if this is an off the rack, ready to wear suit that I'm altering, obviously I can't go back to the pattern and pinch this out. If it was, I could do that and I would adjust this differently. How I would make that alteration is I would open up this neck here, I would measure what this amount is, and I would take it off of the top and recut, like whatever this amount is, I would take it off of the top of the center back and then blend to 0 where I ended the point of my dart. And that would get rid of that wrinkle across the back. And it doesn't really give extra room here in the shoulder area, but it gets rid of that wrinkle, which is very telling that it was a problem with the suit. Another thing that helped out my acrobat gentlemen several times is if they needed a little bit of extra, sometimes you would have a little bit of extra seam allowance in this center back, and you could let it out right between their shoulder blades and give them a little bit of extra room, whatever you can in between the shoulder blades there. You could possibly get a little bit out of the sleeve area, but it's usually, if it's an off the rack suit, you're not going to have very much room there either. And it's a harder alteration. So if you can get a little bit here, you can address that wrinkle that might show up here in the back of the neck. That is going to be an easier alteration to get a cleaner look in the back. Now let's talk about, okay, now we've got the shoulders fixed, and I generally would with suits start with the shoulders if we can, or wherever the biggest adjustment needs to happen. But if the shoulders is the problem area, I would start with that and then go into the waist. Now, this suit doesn't have a vent in the back like a lot of suits do. Now, generally, suit jackets or blazers will have either a center back vent or it will have 2 side vents, because there's generally a back panel, a front panel, and then a side panel when we're talking about typical blazer patterns. So if you do need to take, like a lot of my acrobat performers needed, we'd get it fitting here in the shoulders, and then they had so much room in this waist area. Jason isn't quite as svelte as an acrobat. If you have swimmers, it would be a similar body type as well, or somebody who lifted a lot of weights and is very trim. This would be something that could possibly come up for you as well. So depending on where your vent is, we have a little bit more leeway with this suit because we don't have a vent. So I could take in a dart where the fat part of the dart is right here at the waist. Let me see if I can turn that so you can see. Be right here at the waist. And then I could go to 0 where they needed that space in the shoulder area, and I could go to 0 where they might need that room in the hips. Or you can take it straight down if it's big in the hips as well. So that's if you have a center vent. Basically, you want to take it in at the waist wherever you don't have a vent, because getting into that vent gets really messy and really complicated. It can be done, but if you're trying to do an alteration quickly and cleanly, that is probably not going to be the best thing to do. Another thing, if you do have vents, it's probably wise to pin those vents closed, because just like what we were talking about with the front opening, you don't want to pull something too tight so that that vent is always open, because that is also another sign that it possibly might need more room in the hip area. Those vents are put in to give you a little extra movement, but they should remain closed for the majority of the time that you're wearing it and just open up with movement as you're moving around. So if you had a center back vent, I would suggest that you take it in at the side back seams so that you can go to where you need to. You're not going to run into a vent where you have to stop. The thing when you're taking in a side back, usually I will try to go to nothing, go to 0 before I run into the sleeve, so that I don't have to open up the sleeve, take in the sleeve. Because if you take it in through the sleeve, then you also should take in your sleeve so that your sleeve is gonna fit into the smaller armhole. It again becomes a domino effect of having to adjust a lot more things than just taking in the waist. So it would be a similar thing where you would take in the majority, or you could, and in this case, if I had to take it in a lot, I could take in each seam a little bit so I'm not getting a big dramatic curve in one area. I could take it a little bit in the center back, a little bit on either side seam. So, and you want to pull both of those. I'm going to turn him to the side. So I would grab both side back seams and see how much I wanted to take out, and then pin one and then pin the other, and then try to see if I just take it up to my 0 point before I get into the sleeves, is that going to be enough? Am I still going to have room in the shoulder area? Now, this obviously does not fit me. It's a little large, and I know I've been talking about it mainly from the menswear point of view, but of course this can be non-binary. It can also be for women's wear. It's just we have a little bit of a different shape when we're talking about women's wear typically, and they can be built a little differently. To have darts to make room for the bust area, and the seams might be different, but of course all of this can be applicable to any gender of suit that you are working on or blazer that you are working on. The reason I stole Jason's jacket, thanks Jason, is because the last thing that I wanted to share with you is about hem on your sleeves. This will be a traditional point of view of where your sleeve should hit, and I'm going to show you, and then I'll show you on my hand. Typically when you're looking at your sleeve hem, obviously these are way too long on me, in my opinion. And again, you are the boss. So if you want to go for extra long sleeves, that's your look, that's your flavor, you go for it. You're the one making the adjustment. You're the one with the superpower. If you want them to be super short, you're the boss. You get to make them however you would like. I am going to tell you what I learned is the traditional way of what you should be looking at, but you take these rules and do what works for you. On a sleeve, typically, this bone here on your hand, so where it starts to go out for your thumb, not this bone here at your wrist, but this bone here that comes out at your thumb, that is where your sleeve hem should hit. So when you raise your hand, like we did this a lot for Jersey boys when they're singing, then we don't want it to go like halfway up their arm. So, and see, this is a long suit on me, a long sleeve, and it's already going up that far. So that's why that's traditionally where you want that sleeve to hit. I know that it's also of modern style to see a little bit of the shirt cuff. That is a style preference, but typically you did not want to see the sleeve poking out from your blazer. So, but if that's a look that you like, you go for that look. So typically your shirt would be hemmed shorter than the blazer suit. You would have this be about your length, and then yes, you may see the sleeve as with movement and as you raise your arm to do things, but that is generally the traditional way of how you determine how long your sleeve should be. And oftentimes in Jersey boys, we would have them Like, do what you're gonna do in your suit so we can see, is that where we want it to hit, or do we wanna go a little shorter, a little longer? Now, if it's too short, here's something I wanna share with you. In a lot of costume shops, most costume shops that I have worked, we have these lovely oak tags, and as we're doing fittings with performers, you can write what needs to be done. Take up the dart in the center back neck, take in the waist as pinned in these certain seams, lengthen the sleeves, shorten the sleeves, whatever needs to be done, and then this is hung with the costume. We move on to the next fitting with the next costume. When the stitchers go to do the alterations, they know exactly what needs to be done. In fact, this is from our most recent project where we had notes of what needs to be done. These are great tools. So oftentimes we have lots of these laying around in the costume shop. We would use this a lot of times if we needed to lengthen a sleeve, because it's really easy. If it's too long, we say, okay, we're gonna pin it up the amount we want to shorten it. We're going to be able to visually see that's going to hit where we want it to hit. You put a pin in and we say make it to where it's pinned. That's how much we want to take up. You don't have to take measurements. You don't have to write how much. You can take a measurement and say take up sleeve 1 inch, take up sleeve ½ inch, whatever you want to write. But you know me in math, I try to avoid it if possible, because if you can, it's more of a like take it up this amount. So if you need to lengthen, it might be hard to know how much to lengthen, and if you're doing things quickly, this is where this can come in handy. So this is what we would do at Jersey Boys. My wardrobe head at the time, I was the assistant head of wardrobe, but we would put it and say, we want to lengthen it that visually so we can see when we're in the fitting. Now I have my arm up so that you can see, but typically you'd have your arm hanging down naturally. And you could use the card to be like, yeah, that's about where I want that hem to hit. And then you could pin that card in. Wow, that's really hard to do on myself with one hand, but I did it. So you would pin that card in, and the note on the other alteration tag where you're writing all the things that need to happen would say let out sleeve to the bottom of card. And then as you're the fitter looking at what visually you want to see in the finished garment, it gives you a visual going, yeah, that's about how long I want it to be. And so you can kind of see. So that's another tip that I used to use often. Well, we could keep going on and on to the millions of things that could come up when you are fitting a suit. If you would like more tips, if you have more questions, leave it in a comment below. I'm happy to make another video. I do these Tricky Thursdays around what people have asked me about and what I find might be most valuable to you. So please give me feedback on that. I think that gives you hopefully some good things, some good pointers to get started if you are new to fitting suits and you want a little bit of insight on the most common things that I have seen in my experience fitting suits on a wide range of different body types for different purposes and different occasions. Let me know if you found that helpful. I love to hear from you. That's all we have for Tricky Thursday today. But if you want to learn more about pattern making, you find that interesting, please join me for my free pattern masterclass. That link is down below to where you can follow. Try my teaching style out for free. I do have a different approach of how I like to teach pattern making. Let's have fun and keep it easy. Avoid that math whenever possible. You might just like it, and why not try it out for free? There will be more information if you want to learn more, go deeper down that rabbit hole with me. That's all we have for you today. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.